Hey RATBAGGERS, it's Jay. Today I'm taking a look at a brand new game, Hyperlight Breaker, and it's become my new obsession, getting good at it. It's a brand new open world roguelike that's hitting Steam on the 14th of January, and you can play it on your own or with your pals, offering challenging but compelling action combat in a vibrant, beautiful world. Shout out to Art Games and Heart Machine for sponsoring today's video, and let's go what you need to know about Hyperlight Breaker. So you are a breaker charged with exploring the Overgrowth, a procedurally generated world that will give you a unique experience each and every time you play. You've got 4 lives in a cycle. Hopefully in that time you'll take on the enemies, find enough loot and open up the gates to take on the crown bosses. Is it that simple? No. To succeed, you're going to have to combine your melee, range skills, special abilities and utility items to hopefully progress. It is a challenging game, no doubt about it. I nearly rage quit a few times, but the enjoyment was there as I've started to learn the mechanics, learn how the enemies moved and worked out which piece of loot to go for first. It's not all about having twitch reflexes though, about thinking, strategizing what kind of gear you'll need for any particular run and paying attention to the environment. You'll basically have a cycle of lives, pretty much 4 to go and explore one unique map with different placements of enemies, maybe different types of biomes and challenges. Each time you go through a cycle, the map will regenerate and you're presented with even more new experiences. Some of the coolest stuff in the game is utilising your hoverboard and your wing glider to get around. It does rely on stamina, so eventually it'll run out and you'll have to recharge it, but you'll quickly be skimming around again on the water or up cliffs as you try and find the best loot or take on challenging enemies. As said, the map can be different every time you play in terms of locations and the types of biomes that you'll encounter, from the snowy colds, pink cliffs or maybe vibrant blue forests. There's so much vibrancy and the atmosphere with the weather effects, it really does make you feel quite cozy at times, although danger is always literally a heartbeat away. I've kept my eye on this game for a number of years ever since its first announcement, so I was really pleased to get offered a chance to do a promo because I absolutely was going to be covering the game anyway. It is an early access game, so it's going to continue to receive updates, and I'm enjoying it that much that I'm going to be adding it as part of my continuing rota. So I'm keen to see how it updates and gets more content added over its early access life for sure, but straight off it's the combat that sells the game. There's lots of systems with the combat and different items that you'll be utilising. Effectively, you've got blades. These can take the form of double-edged claws, huge swords, spears or massive giant cleavers. These are your blades that you'll be able to go ahead and find out in the world with an easy to follow map to check out what type of gear you might want to home in on. There's a lot of different weapons, so you have to find the right balance for what works for you. Are you more a heavy and deliberate player, or are you quick and nimble and like to get a few attacks in and move around? Each blade will have its own special move or ability, so you may need a lot of experimentation to find that perfect build, but that's what this game's all about. Combining your dash ability, your parry, and making sure you're utilising the right kind of blade, as well as some ranged weapons and your utilities, is key to succeeding in your runs. It's super satisfying though when it all comes together. You'll get access to different rarity weapons, increasing their power, as well as adding new affixes, basically bonus buffs or elemental damage types to a lot of your weapons. The senses do have to be on the ball when it comes to combat, as it's a third person game, so many times you're going to have enemies swarming around you, so paying attention to the attacks and directions they're coming from is key to you surviving. And as you might expect, there's a variety of different enemies as well as different variants that will offer even more challenges. Some enemies are going to be really close in on you and that's going to be their strength. Others will definitely be trying to get you at range, and some are just really speedy or a mixture of both. And yes, there's some good old reliable slimes to kill in this game. There is quite a lot of depth, and at first you may be a bit overwhelmed by the different types of resources that you'll be finding and picking up, but these all become pretty easy to work out what you'll be spending on once you get back to the hub world. Some items like these cores will help you unlock new abilities or help with some of the stuff that you've already got, or they'll give you direct increases to your damage output, your health, your armor and more. So there are lots of loot chests and caches that you'll have to unlock, and some of it requires a lot of the bright blood. This is the resource that drops from killing enemies and destroying barrels or maybe ancient monuments. So we'll definitely explore some of these in a bit more detail, but keeping track with actual combat, we need to talk about rails. Rails are basically your guns. There's a variety of different ones, from shotgun style to pulse rifles and everything in between. Just like with the blades, you'll find these out in the overworld. The difference being though that you won't start off with a rail. It isn't a default item, so it is something you'll have to buy or unlock or find. And some situations definitely call for a little bit more melee or a mixture of both if you really want to succeed. Your rails rely on battery power, basically a limited number of shots that can regenerate over time. For certain guns, others you will simply have to keep finding more battery power that can drop from certain enemies or from some of the chests and loot that you'll find around the world. You can change your gear on the fly as you find it across the overgrowth. Otherwise, you're going to have to make sure you've prepared for your next run by equipping and making sure your loadout is right. You can stash all of the rails and the blades that you'll come across in the overgrowth to be used for later. But doing so does mean you won't be able to equip them again until you get to the hub. And speaking of the hub, I guess it's time to dive into this. This is effectively where you will reconvene, equip any of the loot that you may have found and stashed, or go ahead and buy some from the vendors. There are different stages of the vendors that you'll basically have to unlock to get some of the goodies from them. There's one that will sell directly lots of different types of blades, one that will sell the rails, and another that will sell hollows, which are effectively new add-ons that can enhance and boost some of your gear or some of your active abilities. As said earlier, you get 4 attempts at basically trying to defeat the grounds and unlocking the Abyss King. You can go ahead and extract your loot, which we'll go over in a while, but effectively you'll come back to the hub each time you die or you manage to extract. With the traders you meet here, this is where you're going to be unlocking all new gear, blades, rails and a lot more. It's also where you can use some of the resources that you gathered to go ahead and upgrade certain gear once you've unlocked the ability or your own character. There are some soft limits to upgrading your character. Effectively, they'll start requiring resources that you won't be able to get until you've taken care of some of the crown bosses. But for sure, you can customize and tailor your build to whatever playstyle you kind of prefer, although definitely melee is a big focus. Once your lives have run out or you have managed to actually defeat some of the grounds and maybe take on the Abyss King successfully, you'll notice the hub has changed with the colours and the tone, and effectively it's the end of the cycle. Depending on how well you've done, you'll start ranking up and unlocking these golden little rations. These are useful for unlocking, again, more abilities or extra gear slots, and for unlocking better prices or more items from some of the traders. All gear does have limited use. Some will be one time only, so if you die on a run, that's it. It will disappear once you've respawned. Others will have 2, 3 or even more. So there's an element of strategy. Even though you might unlock something really powerful, you might not want to use it just as you're running around gathering more loot. Instead, you might want to save that new OP weapon for maybe your boss fight. This is where the depth really comes in, and something that you don't really appreciate until you really start getting good at the game and unlocking more gear, and then strategizing about whether or not it's going to be worth risking that piece of gear right now to succeed in maybe getting more, or saving it for a moment that you'll need later. A vital piece of gear is going to be increasing the med slots. That should be the first thing you buy with one of your golden rations, as that will give you the ability to heal at least once and maybe even more as you progress and explore the overgrowth. And then you've got a variety of different things that will help improve either your flash step, which is effectively your dodge ability, eventually upgrading so that you get more synergy with the different elemental types that you might be using, creating more damage, and you can see there's a lot of tiers to unlock. So in terms of getting to a fully unlocked character, it's going to take you quite a few hours. After around 12, I'd still only manage to hit around level 3, but that's to say I'm not the best maybe at these types of games, although I absolutely love playing them. There's been so many moments where I've only just about escaped an encounter by the skin of my teeth, or ruining a run which I seemingly thought would be easy, trying to nab some extra loot before taking on the boss, only to have my run ended because I got a bit too cocky. Combining your dash or dodge abilities with your parry and then utilising your rail and your blade, plus any other elements that you might get, you can unlock grenades and special little robotic helpers, and even some of the enemies that you fight can be turned into your allies. At various points when you're starting to feel like you're hitting a wall because you're dying so much via just the groups of mobs that you encounter, or maybe try and take on the boss, which I'll slightly cover towards the end, I was saved from raging out by finding something really unique or different and definitely more powerful that would help me. There is so much strategy to this game in terms of working out what type of loot to bring with you. As I mentioned, it is one of them things you're going to have to learn and feel what works with your playstyle. Are you really good at perfect parrying and recognising them tails from enemies? Maybe a bit more like me, dashing about madly and then trying to single out enemies one by one. The more time you spend in an overgrowth in one cycle, the harder the world does get. Each life that you have will reset a tiny little counter that you can see underneath the minimap. These little yellow segments are basically building up enemies to come and attack you, or maybe meteorites to make certain areas more dangerous. So although you can spend a lot of time trying to find all the loot in and around, getting yourself lots of auxiliary guns and blades for later on, it does become a lot harder to survive. Eventually you might even have to face off against really powerful assassins that will definitely be on par with some of the bosses that you'll encounter. So you can for sure be a little loot goblin, but it's definitely going to get harder. And remember, the main objective is to unlock the gates to take on these crown bosses. But first we need to get some of the prisms. These can be found in certain locations, maybe hard to reach areas, but more often than not you'll be looking for little yellow diamonds signifying maybe potentially a mini boss. These variants are absolutely tougher than what you'll normally encounter, so strategizing and working out which way is best to defeat them is definitely going to take some practice. Once you've got a few prisms, you can go and take on one of the boss fights. Some of the bosses though do require a lot of the prisms, so you will have to clear out the whole map, and again you've got to balance that against the map getting tougher and tougher to survive, or maybe extracting and coming back and making it a bit easier. Each map will have a special extraction point that can be activated at any time, even if you've only gone and collected one piece of bright blood from a chest and decided you've got to just hop out. But that doesn't mean it's going to be easy. You'll have to encounter and fight off a few waves of enemies, as well as a more tougher variant enemy to then make your escape back to the hub world. I really like this mechanic, and it wasn't something I was utilising enough in the early stages. I was basically just dying and restarting a cycle every few times instead of actually extracting all of my loot and making sure that I could return. By extracting, you don't use up one of your attempts at taking on the map, so you can effectively clear out the whole map, taking all the loot and not aggravating the whole of the overgrowth to make it as tough as possible before you even get a chance to take on some of the bosses. So when you extract, you get to keep all of your gear without losing any of its basic durability or goes. Whether you die or extract, you'd always bring back certain materials like your bright blood, medigen plants that will convert into basically a medipen, and more resources like cores. So yeah, 100% if you can extract when you found something powerful that you want to use for your next run, rather than risk losing maybe a go or durability use of it, then that's something to bear in mind. Otherwise, this is what you contend with if you die too many times. This gives it a complex, different type of meta compared to a lot of other roguelikes that I've played, where generally you keep playing and you keep getting better and more powerful. That will happen eventually through some of the abilities and unlocks that you can get through either the traders or yourself. But definitely can come points where you're doing really well and only a few careless mistakes put you right back at the bottom again, perhaps if you're not paying the game full attention and utilising things like extraction. Each time you die or you go back into the overgrowth, you will find enemies respawn, and not always exactly the same ones. They may change position, some of them, or swap out certain enemies in different areas. What won't respawn is the loot that you've already managed to go and grab. So if you're really good at the game, it could come to the point that you're extracting frequently. You've gone and got every single piece of stash loot, rails, blades and more. Now it's the time to take on one of the crowns. The crowns do rotate in terms of what amount of prisms they'll need to unlock a gate, so you may find that some of them will change. But this guy was the one that I came across the most often, and even after 12 hours, I've yet to beat him. I'm still working out and choreographing the attacks from him, and it is definitely hard. You definitely need to build up your supply of good gear, making sure you get better rarity and much stronger items, and maybe even go ahead and upgrade your character a bunch of times first. So I know the payoff when I eventually defeat this dude is definitely going to be big after so many hours of struggling and working out the mechanics. I'm going to be doing a full first impressions video, but I definitely want to put across to players right now. If you like games like Dark Souls, if you like roguelikes like Dead Cells, or maybe even more recent ones like Raven's Watch, I think you really will appreciate the love that's gone into Hyper Light Breaker. Of course, it is a semi-pseudo sequel to Hyper Light Drifter. That was a fantastic, again, challenging roguelite a few years ago, and the move to 3D has definitely presented some new ways to really love the world that this is set in. There's some story elements and beats that you can unlock via hieroglyphics that you'll come across, and they'll give you maybe little cutscenes or static images to give you more info about the bosses and some of the enemies that you'll encounter. Really, this game's all been about the action, weighing up when to get involved in something, when to maybe back away and try and extract with the right loot and build yourself up for that next run. I've got so much to show you guys. I can't wait to dive in more with some of the guides, especially for the early game, of course. And yeah, as soon as I've defeated this guy, I'll be presenting all of my knowledge to hopefully help you so you don't make the same mistakes that I have. Once again, before we leave, a big shout out to Art Games and Heart Machine Studios for giving me the opportunity to do this sponsored video today. Go and check the game out on Steam, see if it's for you, and obviously take a look at my first impressions and more gameplay guides if you're still sitting on the fence. Really interested in playing this with others as well, and I think that's definitely going to be more challenging or maybe slightly easier, who knows, but either way, maybe I won't see this screen as much. My name's Jade, I'll see you ratbags later.